We have a very special guest episode for you guys today because we are crossing over with the Guilty as Charged podcast to talk about this 2025 season and why the Chargers are definitively better than they were in 2024.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers together now for 10 seasons, but this is our 8th season as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. To make sure that you never miss big-time crossover episodes and huge special guests like on today's show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. And David, this was a long overdue show. So glad we had the guys on today, and they both crushed it. It was a lot of fun.
They really did. I mean, it was so much fun to talk with them about everything that's happened with the Chargers this offseason, just because, you know, we're in our own little bubble and we don't always listen and pay attention to everything else out there. And so to hear their perspectives and to hear their knowledge of what's going on with the game, and also co-signing with the hype on Joe Alt, they are 100% on board that, hey, he might be in line for a All-Pro and maybe Hall of Fame type of career.
There's been a ton of hype. They also believe in the hype in Zion Johnson. No, I'm just messing with you. But they were awesome. Here they are, the Guilty as Charged podcast. All right, guys. Well, we have a very special guest, a show we've been trying to do for a while, and we finally got the schedules to finally sync up for us to have a quad box of Chargers content creators. It's Locked On Chargers. It's Guilty as Charged. Super excited to have these guys on the show who have just not only worked for the Chargers and did a show for the Chargers, which is about the pinnacle of what you could try to do, doing what we do, which is just so cool, but also just some of the best Chargers content creators out there. We have Tyler Schoon and Stephen Haglund, you know, the guys from the Guilty as Charged podcast, coming to do a little bit of an off-season crossover event. And where do you even start, man? Like, I think there's so many places you could go with this team, so many young players, so many kind of question marks about the roster. But I think it starts pretty simply because I think every team goes into the offseason and could make the argument for their team. My team got better. Did you see their draft picks? Did you see what they did in free agency? And every team thinks they got better, but not every team does get better. So, Tyler, I'll start it with you. At the end of the day, straight to brass tacks, did the Chargers, or are the Chargers, I guess, better in 2025 than they were in 2024?
They are a better team on paper than they were in 2024. That is, I can't deny that. Now, did they get better with one giant swing with a DK Metcalf? No. But did they take small approaches and get 3%, 4% better with several different additions through free agency or the draft to get to be a better team overall? Absolutely. And I think that more so than anything starts on offense with what they did at running back, with Becton, with the receivers. I think that they got significantly better on offense. Now, does that take them into a top 5 offense? I don't think so. And that's more so a coordinator question and interior offensive line question for me. But I think they got better. With Minter, with the defense, they didn't give him a ton to work with for the most part. And they admitted themselves, like, they didn't get, one guy and bring Poona Ford back. They brought multiple guys in. Does that mean they're better? I don't know, but I trust Minter. I trust Elston. But I think just being in year 2, understanding Derwin James' role and where he excels, Elijah Molden, etc. Yeah, I think they got better.
Steven, would you agree?
Yeah, I think on offense, they have definitively added more weapons to the problems that they had. We've talked about on our show the problems that the X position gave the offense last year, where they signed DJ Chark. They're doing the whole Brendan Rice, Simi Fehoko thing in training camp. And, who knows how that would have worked out if Justin hadn't been injured in training camp himself. We never really got to see those guys get like a real chance. And then Chark also got injured. But they essentially got like 160 yards total from the whole season from those 3 guys at the X position. And so you go out, you bring Mike Williams back, you take Trey Harris in round 2, who I'm not as high on him as Tyler was, but he was still very much like a top 10 wide receiver for me in that class. And you could throw Rondé Gaston into that group as well. He can flex out and play the X. So you take a problem position like the X receiver, and they just threw 3 bodies at it. And you could make the same argument for running back. You can make the same argument for tight end with Gadsden and Tyler Conklin going back there. So offense, I love the approach that they took, just throwing multiple bodies at all of their problems. Defense, I think it's more about, year 2 in the system. Let's add more depth, and let's just, we're going to continue to develop players. The coaching staff is going to take care of the improvement, whereas in offense, we just need an injection of talent, and that's kind of how I think they approach the offseason.
Especially when you consider the draft. I mean, the Chargers clearly went into the draft looking for a lot of weapons to add to give Justin Herbert some help. And, obviously, the first and second round with 4 of their top 6 picks. After seeing the lack of firepower shown in a huge way against the Texans, do you think the Chargers were able to give him enough of a supporting cast necessary to find some more consistency in on the offensive side in 2025?
I absolutely think so. I mean, you can talk about the run game, of course. I think hopefully Greg Roman will check the ball down to the running back and throw to the running back more frequently. But we joked so many times last season where they get to the end zone. And do you remember a play that was specifically dialed up for a good receiving tight end in the end zone?
Ooh.
I really don't recall many of those last year. And not that Conklin is, Brock Bowers or Travis Kelce, but he's so much of a better option for them. So I think in that regard, they're going to improve. I think Trey Harris was like my favorite player in the entire draft. So it's kind of hard for me to sit here and objectively say they just got a little bit better. I think he's going to be awesome. It's going to take some time, but I think the Chargers definitely improved the weapons around him significantly.
I think you just don't want to see another Lad McConkey box score game, right? Like that's what you're trying to get away from is literally, I mean, Steven, that was one of the craziest things I've ever seen. I don't think we'll ever see an NFL playoff box score like the one we saw in that Houston Texans game, where it's literally Lad McConkey 9 for $197 and a couple touchdowns, and then literally 2 for 18. You had to correct that.
Yeah, it felt like early on they had a plan, a very specific, ideology that they wanted to run the offense through with the running game, with the offensive line, with Lad. But then as the season went along, it was like, if JK's not popping off an explosive run and if Lad's not working, we just don't have any other pieces that we trust. And I think Quentin Johnston took a pretty nice leap forward. I think he gave me a serviceable player, but they needed him to become a legit wide receiver too, and that didn't happen. They needed DJ Chark to be a reliable contributor in some capacity. That just didn't happen. Hayden Hurst, same thing. And we talked about it on our show where there was just no trust between Herbert and Hayden Hurst at any point of the season. And then Hurst got injured. And so it was basically just okay, well, I know at least Will Dissly will catch the ball. And then I know Lad McConkey will catch the ball. And I know Palmer can kind of do some things every once in a while. And then that was it. And so now you have all of these other pieces. And I think, we'll really see what the ideology is from a full standpoint, assuming everybody is relatively healthy. But the combination of all of the injuries and just the lack of talent, I think, really derailed any kind of chance for us to see the true whole scope of the Jim Harbaugh, Greg Roman offense last year.
It felt like that for sure. And I think the hard thing about that game was it was at least the final game was such a perfect storm where it's you can blame the interior, the offensive line, sure, but look at that box score, right? You could blame the receiving option, sure, but Justin Herbert's fighting for his life in there. So it's you just needed other guys, like Tyler said, are you guys saying just an infusion of talent? Some of it will come down to your coaches getting the most, and you have the most faith in Jesse Minter to do more, and maybe that kind of backfires when he's looking to add players onto that side. It's well, Jesse, we got Greg over here, and he really, really needs some help, okay? So, here's a Deshaun Hand, here's a Naquan Jones, They're big. They're very big. You got bigger over there, But I do agree where it's at some point, you just needed some way to not have 6 halves in your season where you're going scoreless, right? The amount of times we just saw that offense completely disappear, whether it's Justin Herbert's injury or just the lack of personnel to be able to run a consistently good offense that you can count on late in games, but also just to not disappear for giant portions of the game, I thought was huge. But Steven, I think it started with free agency, with the amount of money. The hype surrounding the free agency period was just a total mania because of how much space they had. And what did the Chargers do? Probably what we should have expected, right? They were very low-key, very financially responsible, but there's not a single Chargers fan that wants me to get on here and talk about financial responsibility. They just don't, right? They wanted to see big swings, and they didn't treat it that way. Mekhi Becton, obviously, out of this class, was the big ticket item, and no doubt he's going to have a huge impact if he stays healthy on the field this year. But if I take that option away with the rest of the kind of low-key, smaller depth signings or guys that are going to even be starting for them, Who do you think will make the biggest impact out of that free agency class?
I think it has to be Mekhi Becton by a large amount. Like
I took him away, you sick guy. I took him away.
Sorry.
I'm taking him out of the conversation.
Jesus.
Steven
My
had
bad.
COVID. He might
My
have
bad.
razor blades. We don't know. But taking away Mekhi Becton, that's the easy answer. Who else would you go with? Obviously.
Yeah, that's my bad. That's my bad.
We have more great stuff with the Guilty as Charged guys coming up after this, including the Chargers' low profile in free agency and the most impactful move that they made, and also if this rushing attack can finally turn things around, and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat, and it's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building your wealth. And I love just the organization of Monarch Money. It was so easy to integrate all my finances into it, but not only that, so easy to collaborate with my wife and with all the spending that she's doing for this baby and the amount of packages that show up at my door. It's great to know, okay, well, that's a baby thing. You know, we had to have that, but also knowing how much different that is now and being able to set goals for next month. Okay, hey, where can we move things around and how do we kind of work together? The collaboration is so easy with Monarch Money. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off of your first year.
I'll go with Tyler Conklin next, and I think
I love that.
There's a lot of Chargers fans that are rightfully very excited about Aaron Gadsden, but I think they're pushing Tyler Conklin aside with that hype, and they're expecting Gadsden to come in and be this tight end one right away, and he might, like, that's on the table with his athletic profile. But I think Tyler Conklin is a really good, solid tight end. Is he going to be, you know, a Mark Andrews type that goes over 1,000 yards? Probably not. But this is a guy who has proven track record of getting over 500, 600 yards with guys like Zach Wilson and the ghost of Aaron Rodgers throwing him passes and Nathaniel Hackett designing plays. And, you know, he got a little roasted for that clip the other day, working on some things. But those are all routes that he runs on a regular basis, and it works with NFL players. And the one thing we know about Justin Herbert and how he kind of processes things is if he trusts you to be in the right spot at the right time and catch his passes, he's going to show you a lot of love. And I think Tyler Conklin is going to be that security blanket over the middle. Is he going to have the volume to get to 600 yards? Maybe not, but can he give them 500 yards and 6 or 7 touchdowns? I think that's very much on the table. And that's just a presence that the Chargers, all due respect to Will Dissly, have not really had at the tight end position in a few years now.
Yeah, I agree there. I think Conklin would have been my choice. I actually thought you would have gone with Najee Harris there because of he's going to touch the ball quite a bit.
I just don't know. Like Omari Hampton could easily be the RB1 like right away.
Yeah.
And so I think there are some questions about the ceiling of Najee, whereas I trust Conklin more than Najee to keep his rookie at bay.
I think it depends maybe how you're looking at it. So if Hampton, I think when we try to make comparisons, it's only natural as fans. We say Hampton is this year's J.K. Dobbins. And I think in that regard, as long as you can keep pace or maybe be better or even just a little under of what Dobbins did last year, that's great. To me, Najee Harris is your Gus Edwards. And I think that's where you're going to see that big difference there. I don't care who starts as long as they're good. Is 4.0, 4.1, 3.9 yards per carry from Najee Harris with the Steelers. Hopefully that's better with the Chargers. Is that an awesome rushing attack? No. But what it's better than is what Gus Edwards was last year, and it's more consistent, and I think they realize that they can rely on it. I also think that not that Najee Harris is a Christian McCaffrey type of receiving option for them, but with Gus Edwards, he faced stacked boxes more than I think anybody else in the league last year in terms of the rate at which he faced those stacked boxes. You're watching Gus Edwards and you watch film, they're never throwing him the football. Like, they're never going to check it down to him. Najee Harris can actually catch the football. Now, granted, the joke is, like, will Greg Roman throw the football to Najee Harris? Will he design something for Najee Harris? I don't know. But I think that combined with just being able to rely on him, even if it's not amazing, I'd love 6 yards a carry. 4.1 would be a big improvement for them. Catching the football would be a big improvement for them. So I think over Gus Edwards, I think even if Hampton is RB1 by mid-season, end of the year, whatever, I think what Najee Harris does along the way will do enough to show, why they signed him.
Yeah, Najee's awesome in pass protection too. Also, like
Mm.
like I went back and watched him after they signed him, and that was something that immediately stood out to me. The Steelers
That's a great
very
call.
rarely like had him in 2-minute drills. It was always Jalen Warren. But when Najee was out there on third down, like he is definitely not afraid to go stick it to a linebacker, and he's very, very disruptive in that regard. So that's a good call out by Tyler for sure.
Such
That
an
doesn't
underrated
surprise
part
me at
of
all
it.
because he's gigantic. You know,
Well, and the
Najee
thing
Harris
is, too, is
But
like
Gus
massive
Edwards was
running back.
gigantic, and he was horrible.
That's true.
In pass protection.
Being just gigantic isn't always it. But the thing is, too, is like Omarion Hampton, very good for a college running back in pass protection. You know who else was? Kamani Vidal, right?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't always happen for you right away, David. And I think that is the other question here, though, too, is like with Najee Harris and his impact, like what is that split going to be, David? I know we have a question for that.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's a lot of excitement surrounding the Chargers rushing attack, obviously, with the additions of Omarion in the first round and bringing in Najee Harris via free agency. But we don't know if there will be a lead back or if it will be, like, true running back by committee. Do you think there is a chance that Hampton could take over at some point and get the lion's share of the carries? Or do you see this as truly going to be a 50-50 split?
I think to start the season, it'll be a true 50-50 split. I think the two of them will take the lion's share of the workload. Like I know our friend Alex Insdorf is like the biggest, Kamani Vidal fan out there. And there are still a lot of Chargers fans that are very high in Kamani. But I have a really hard time seeing this be more than just the two of them. And then Hassan Haskins is like your special teams guy, your short yardage guy if you want.
Yeah.
But I think Jim Harbaugh has wanted to coach Najee Harris since like 2012. Like this man has wanted to have Najee on his team for such a long time. They didn't pay him a ton, but they paid him a starting running back salary. They drafted Omarion in the first round. I think it's going to be a true 50-50 split. But the weaknesses in Najee's game do make me think that Omarion can become the true starter, and Najee's still going to have a role, but maybe that becomes kind of a 60-40 split after, the bye kind of thing. But Omarion has such an explosive play potential to his game that Najee doesn't. I think eventually Omarion is just going to outplay Najee and start earning more carries, more touches, and Najee will still kind of be that complimentary back. But I think eventually the season will end with Omarion as RB1.
Yeah, I 100% agree there. I think maybe, week one, you're playing the Chiefs. Maybe you give it to Najee Harris because you just want to make sure you get through that game. It's Hampton's first big game. But as the season progresses, I think, as Steven pointed out, you're going to see Hampton overtake Harris. Obviously, they're committed to him for far more years than Najee Harris. So I think you start to see that. And I hope Chargers fans are patient. Even if Hampton has 7 carries a game and they're better than Harris's 14, I don't know.
Right.
Be patient. With Ladd McConkey last year, it took till the end of October for Greg Roman to go, yeah, okay, I'll trust him. And that's with Quentin Johnston and DJ Chark being hurt and all the other things happening with the receivers. Like with all of that, it still took them till almost November to go, all right, fine, I'll throw it to Ladd McConkey more. And so I think with Hampton, like it could take a little bit. They're going to lean on their veterans first, let the rookie show what they can do. And then if Hampton by, mid-season goes, yeah, I got this. Yeah, then he'll take over.
Well, especially when you think of kind of how things played out last season. Like it started with Gus kind of being the main guy, right? Even if it was pretty clear that JK just kind of had an extra gear to him and was easily the more explosive back. But the one thing we didn't get was a healthy season for both of them to see how it would have played out had they been both on the field at the same time, what that split would have ended up looking like by the end of the season. But there's no doubt about them being, more set up to have a better rushing attack. I mean, we talked about it before, even with the flaws, when we're going to get into the flaws of the offensive line. We know the fans want us to talk about that for an hour straight. We're going to have plenty on it. But what I would say, though, is at least those guys are all pretty decent run blockers, at the very least, even with their flaws in pass protection. So I think, I looked it up the other day. If you take a, offensive lineman with at least 700 blocking snaps total, like there's not a single guy between the tackles and the guards that ranked worse than 30th amongst Pro Football Focus blocking grades. So it's like you don't have an obvious flaw there, an obvious wart there. And then I believe Bradley Bozeman was about in the top half of all centers as far as his run blocking ability specifically. We still have more great stuff with the Guilty as Charged boys coming up after this, including what everyone wants, some talk about the interior of this offensive line and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. But there are a lot of expectations for this running game going into 2025, Tyler. And it's so wild to look at Greg Roman rushing stats and what he did before he got to the Chargers. Like He had a top 4 unit 9 out of his 10 seasons as offensive coordinator, including 4 number 1 starts, right? And the funniest part was the juxtaposition of the 17th ranked rushing attack being Justin Herbert's best total rushing attack since he's been in the NFL last year, but so easily being the
I
worst.
didn't realize that.
So easily being the worst rushing attack that Greg Roman's ever had. I mean, the worst he had ever finished for one of his teams was 8th. And then last year they were 17th, which was still the best that poor Justin Herbert has ever had. But with the new additions, Tyler, do you think this is a room where we can say this year, hey, if Greg, if there's anyone who could turn this rushing attack around, it's Greg Roman. Do we see that group look substantially better in 2025?
Yeah, if they don't, I have serious concerns. They were 27th in success rate, I believe, rushing group, and that is not good. I can't believe, as you said, that's arguably Justin Herbert's best rushing offense behind him. All respect to Kalen Ballage and the ghost of Austin Eckler, but like, I didn't realize it was that bad. So thanks for bringing that up mid-show.
I would have assumed 2021 would have gotten there because of Frank Smith, but
yeah, I don't know. That one Kellen Moore Dolphins game didn't do it, I guess.
Yeah.
Will they be better? Absolutely, because I think they went into this offseason, and with the moves that they made, everything makes sense for the run game to get better. Yes, there's running back additions. Yes, of course, there's Mekhi Becton. That's all very much like, yes, run game. Year 2, things are going to help, obviously. They know, I think, like their run game identity with their tight ends as well. Matlock's not having to figure things out and block Max Crosby week 1 for like the first time in his life. Right. They're going to go, I think, with Tucker Fisk, whereas last year they had Tomlinson. Like they're trying, like they know their blocking group now. But where I think we're going to see the difference a little bit more is just with the fact that they actually have receivers who you can push the ball down the field to them, whether it's Mike Williams, whether it's Trey Harris, whether it's Jalen Reagor. Apparently they're going to go with that too. That is going to loosen things up, I think, a bit for them underneath and help them a bit there too. So again, did they make one giant swing or multiple giant swings to fix the run game and fix the offense? Like, no, not necessarily, but every little piece, just having Mike Williams out there, having Trey Harris out there, that's going to help too. Yes, they're going to take a step forward. Are they top 10? I don't know. It also kind of depends on how healthy Justin Herbert is this year and whether he can run.
I think part of that too is being able to run to both sides of the field now. Like I went back and watched some of Joe Alt's rookie season, and they were just actively not trying to run right as often as they could. Like they were like, we're gonna avoid that side. We don't trust Trey Pipkins as nearly as much as we trust Zion, which I understand, and we don't trust Joe Alt as much as we trust Rashawn, which I understand. Now we hear Joe Alt has added all of this great lean mass, and he looks significantly bigger. And at Notre Dame, he definitely showed a skill set to be a very high quality run blocker. So you put Mekhi Becton next to him, you have the biggest right side of offensive line in the league, and this is part of the reason why I want Zion to stay at left guard, is because I just want to keep him next to Rashawn, because I know what those two look like together as a run blocking pair. And so you have these two guards now that are both highly above average run blockers. You have Tucker Fisk, who Tyler mentioned. You have better running backs that we talked about earlier. And the running game can work to both sides equally, as opposed to we're running left because that's the only place we can go. I think their identity, again, kind of getting back to that whole thing, will just be able to be a little bit more open. And now they have the players to execute it. So I don't think the passing game can truly get to top 10-ish, but I think the run game, if it's anything worse than 15th, I think would be a pretty big disappointment.
Yeah, that would be a huge disappointment. I mean, considering they were 17th last year, I mean, they've made quite a bit of strides in that avenue. So obviously we talked about it a little bit with that last question, but I think we've made the people wait long enough. It's time to get into the interior of the offensive line. So obviously after the way that, their season ended, last year, the Chargers needed to improve the interior of the offensive line, but the only clear upgrade they really made was signing Mekhi Becton. So far this offseason seems like the most likely scenario is some combination of Bradley Bozeman and Zion Johnson on that interior, starting at either guard or center. Were you surprised at all the Chargers didn't do to address the most obvious flaw on the roster?
Go for it, Steven.
We've read a lot about this on our show. The answer to your question is yes, absolutely. Just based off of outside looking in, I had heard also that the Chargers did a ton of homework on the free agent guards. If Trey Smith had actually hit free agency, I firmly believe they would have been in on Trey Smith. They were digging around on Will Fries. They were digging around on Aaron Banks. Those two guys signed for a boatload of money that I don't think the Chargers are really ever willing to get to. So they settled for Mekhi Becton, which I still think is a very good signing. But I firmly expected the Chargers to come away from the offseason with some combination of two players to challenge Zion and Bradley for those positions. And when they signed Andre James, I was like, okay, there's one. And then at that point, after that, I kind of figured, okay, they're going to find a left guard competition in the draft. And then that didn't happen. And so I think us as fans, like my biggest takeaway from the most recent press conferences and things like that, in terms of this particular thing, is that Jim Harbaugh and this offense love Zion Johnson. They will hype him up at every chance that they get. And while there are definitely things that he needs to clean up, if you're a team that's like, we are run first and we're going to protect Justin Herbert and all this stuff, I can understand why someone like Zion can appeal to you. And then there's all the stuff that he apparently like practiced the day of a root canal and he played through all these injuries and he's the biggest weight room warrior and all this stuff.
For life.
Yeah. So like, I can understand why they like him, but I just wish that Joe Ortiz would have had a little bit of foresight and say, hey, like we need to get some competition in here. He's also a free agent after the season. And so, yes, I am definitely surprised. I wish that they were giving Andre James any kind of chance to start at center because I do think, he could at least push Bradley Bozeman a bit. So it's unfortunate. I think the offensive line will be better just because Becton will be better than Pipkins, but and Alt will be better than he was last year. But yeah, it's definitely surprising that this particular group watched Zion and Bradley Bozeman the entire year and said, okay, we're running it back.
Yeah, that was definitely a surprise for me. Yes, they did upgrade at one spot, but I really did not think that they were going to just have the other two spots. Look, if Zion Johnson and Bradley Bozeman won the jobs, and they won the jobs because there was other guys they brought in, or a draft pick, or several draft picks, maybe even a high draft pick, and those were just your best guys in the end, okay, I can kind of get behind that. Sure. But for them to talk about the tip of the spear and the offensive line being the tip of the spear, and then forget like half of the spear, I have a hard time like trying to see what's going on here because
spear with no handle. Yeah.
Basically. Yeah. A blunt spear, if anything else right now. So I wish they did more. And part of it is, as Steven mentioned, there's free agency next year. They're losing several guys next year to free agency. Who's next for them? I have no idea. And it's surprising they don't have anybody else waiting in the wings. And I'm also just concerned because, we might talk about interior defensive line today and stuff like that. I still feel confident, no matter who they put out there at interior defensive line, that Elston and Minter are going to get the most out of those guys because I saw it last year, not just with your best player, but 1 through 6. Like they all were better than expected, I think, for the most part. With the offensive line and with Devlin, I don't have that same confidence right now. So if you tell me like, hey, if let's say Jesse Minter was your offensive line coach, whatever, and you told me that they're going to kind of like do this and that, I just trust them wholeheartedly. Like whatever you do, sure. I'm in. With Devlin, I have not seen that yet, and I can't give you credit for Slater being good. Yes, alt switching sides and being great is awesome. 5th overall pick. They went 0 for 3 on the interior offensive line last year. Like nobody even was remotely close to what we were hoping for from them. And Zion, I think, got worse. So I don't have that faith in them right now. So yes, I am very surprised that they didn't add bodies, and I am very concerned heading into the season.
How could you not be, right? I mean, obviously Jim Harbaugh has put Zion Johnson in every single favorable list that he's made, whether it's an ascending player or, an elite training player. Like Zion Johnson leads the list in every category. But I mean, maybe only fails to the hype that we've seen them give to Joe Alt. A special thank you to the boys over at Guilty as Charged. And if you like today's show, I have great news. We have a whole nother show worth of this interview and even better stuff coming in the second show. So thank you guys so much for checking out today's show and making us your first listen. To make sure you never miss shows like this, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. But so much more good stuff, including the most concerning parts outside of the interior of the offensive line for this roster. Some hype about the Chargers offensive line and some players on there, which I love to hear. And also the ultimate faith we all have in Jesse Minter. And maybe, what is this new jersey going to look like? Or these jerseys, I should say. We get into all of that. So make sure you guys are following at Locked On LAC on Twitter, at Locked On Chargers on Instagram, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page to make sure that you don't miss it. But we're probably going to do that show on Wednesday just in case something does come up, though. Then we'll put it on Friday. But, if there is something happens and it's big, we will be here to talk with you guys about it. But we'll be back with you guys on Wednesday. Until then, take it easy and go Bolts.